Welcome everybody to the American Craft Forum, Innovation in the Face of Adversity. We're gonna just wait 1 minute as people come into the room because it's a high volume call and we just wanna give everybody an opportunity to make it into the room. But for those of you who are looking at the screen, right up on screen today, right now we have with us Cornelia, Carrie, and Sarah Schultz, and Laura Zabel from our sponsor organizations, American Craft Council, CERFplus, Springboard for the Arts. And my name is Gwynne Rukenbrod Smith, and I am the Executive Director of SNAG. So we'll get going in just one moment as everybody gets admitted into the room. Thank you so much for your patience, and welcome to our very second American Craft Forum conversation. Okay, it looks like most people have been admitted into the room, so we'll go ahead and get started. For those of you who are joining us a little later, my name is Gwynne Rukenbrod Smith, and I am today's moderator. I'm also the Executive Director of SNAG. I'd also like to take a moment to thank our other sponsors for this conversation, the American Craft Council, CERFplus, and Springboard for the Arts. You may be in the house right now, but it's time that we start thinking outside the box. This is a free 3-part online series that is meant to be inspiring, refreshing, pragmatic, and a safe conversation space to explore innovations in our craft communities to the adversities and challenges during the COVID-19 outbreak. We want to hear from you about ways artists, writers, and organizations are creating innovation in a time of crisis. Today's conversation will be about understanding the impact and pursuing relief. The nation's arts and culture industry is experiencing devastating economic losses with closed venues and canceled performances, exhibitions, and events as a result of this pandemic. With the passing of the $2 trillion emergency stimulus package, this includes important provisions supporting the art sector and creative workforce. There is still a lot to sort out for independent artists, entrepreneurs, and organization leaders. Our series today will include Innovation in the Face of Adversity. We'll continue with this session being devoted to helping you navigate what all this means for the craft sector and the practical advice for pursuing relief. So I would like to welcome everybody. I have a few house rules. First of all, this is a high volume Zoom call. We will be having probably over 500 or 600 people total join us, which is a wonderful thing, but we do ask for a few things. The first thing is we do ask that you keep your video camera and your audio speaker off at all times. The way that you will ask questions is through the chat room. And the way you can find that is if you scroll to the bottom, for those of you who are new to Zoom, and you see the navigation bar pop up, there is a chat button that you can push on and your chat will pop up. It's very important that your chat should automatically be set to send your message to everyone, but you will see when you pop your chat box up, it does say $2:, and then there is something in blue, and it should say everyone. If it doesn't, please make sure it is set to everyone or we will not see your questions as co-hosts. So that is very important to keep in mind. Another thing about Zoom that you may or may not know about is you can view Zoom in a variety of different ways. And there are 2 main ways to see what's happening on the screen. If you scroll to the top right corner, you can click on speaker view. And if you do that right now, you'll see the main speaker come up, and then you'll see everybody else who's on camera kind of come across, or you can go to gallery view, and that's where you get more of that Brady Bunch view of a variety of screens. The last thing that I want to talk about is the way you can hide non-video participants. This is something that we didn't catch at the last call, but those of you who are participating in the audience, you can hide all those little black squares where people's names are on them. And the way that you do that is you go to any of those black squares with a name on it. You only have to go to one and move your cursor to the top right corner. There's 3 dots that will appear in that black square. If you click on those 3 dots and you come down and it says hide non-video participants, that will hide everybody but the participants that have their cameras on. So that might be a little bit easier for those of you who joined us last week and maybe had to scroll between pages to find the videos of people participating and talking. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that to make it easier for all of you. And lastly, at the end of this conversation, you will be sent a survey from the American Craft Council, and we highly encourage and ask that you please give us your feedback. Please fill out that survey and send it back so that we can adjust as needed for our last call. It also gives us lots of great information for future potential calls as well. So we would really highly like to encourage everybody to take a quick moment. It's not very long to fill out the survey after today's call. So again, you are joining us for the second session of the American Craft Forum, Innovation in the Face of Adversity. And my first person that I would like to just introduce is both our tech guru, Jason Samuels, and Lauren Baker, who is our savvy online chat room moderator and remote researcher in residence for ACC because she lives in the UK. And she was, of course, because of COVID-19, unable to travel. I just want to do a quick check-in with the two of them to make sure we haven't forgotten to inform the audience about anything else. This is Lauren. Hey, Lauren.
Hi, everyone. Hi.
Hi. We'll be working behind the scenes to make sure people keep their cameras off and their microphones muted. Lauren's going to be feeding us questions and making sure that we see them because there probably will be a lot in the chat. And we are going to do our best to get to each and every question as we can. But of course, we are limited to time. So thank you both, Jason and Lauren. And is there anything I forgot to tell the audience before we get started?
No, you're doing great, Gwen.
Wonderful. Thanks you two for being our behind the scenes folks that support us on these calls. We really appreciate it. All right. So the first person I would like to introduce is Sarah Schultz from the Executive Director of the American Craft Council. Sarah, would you like to say a few words of welcome?
I just want to say, first of all, I want to say welcome to everybody. I can see from the scroll in the chat that people are coming from all around the United States joining us in this virtual space, which just makes us really happy and really thrilled that we can all come together. I also just really want to acknowledge and thank all of the partners and all of the colleagues who've worked so hard on pulling these together. You know, here at ACC, we really, strive to build a healthy craft ecology, and we know the healthiness of that ecology is in many regards on shaky ground right now, and it's really coming together that we can, that we can support one another and build a future, and this is part of it. We had a great conversation last week. I noticed that Lauren actually posted the transcript, a link to the website and the transcript from it. So for those of you who weren't here, I would encourage you to go listen. It was an honest conversation. It was a really inspiring conversation, and focused even more on opportunities than it did on vulnerabilities, although it covered a gamut. And I think the big takeaway from that is that, we're not just a community of artists, we're a community of artists, of entrepreneurs, of activists, of caregivers, of organizers, of teachers, inventors, and most of all, just a community of real human beings. And so what excites me in all of this challenge is not just what artists make, but it's what you all make happen. So I hope today is a really great day where we talk about how to really support all of the great things that you all make happen.
That's great. Thank you so much, Sarah, for that wonderful welcome and wrap up. And yes, Lauren did post that link to the craftcouncil.org website where you can find last week's chat, as well as transcript and summary of the conversations. So you can find that in the chat. And for those of you who are new to the conversation, we do record this and we do save the chat, and we will load these up as well onto the American Craft Council website early next week so that you all can access them, or anybody who was unable to make it to today's call can access this call as well. The second person that I'd like to introduce is Cornelia Carrie, the Executive Director of CERF. Cornelia, would you like to say a few words?
Thanks, Gwen, and thanks to the American Craft Council and Springboard and SNAG and my esteemed colleagues who are going to be talking in greater detail later on in this call. I think these have been really fabulous conversations so far, and we're only into number 2. And I hope everyone out there is doing okay and staying healthy. And we've been shut in here for so long, our dogs are getting tired of us. But anyway, I love the topic for today, especially the relief part. I like to think about the founding of CERF, which was at an American Craft Council show in 1985. That kind of picked up on that idea of mutual aid, artists helping artists, at almost every single show, and it probably is true still today. artists would have, somebody would have an emergency and artists would literally pass the hat for their friends and neighbors and send that person home with some cash to help pay the bills. And you know, that vision of Carol Setterstrom Ross, who's the founder of the American Craft Council shows, and Josh Simpson, and a lot of enthusiastic supporters of the craft artist community, as well as craft lovers. Hopefully many of those old timers are on this call today as well. But anyway, launching CERF, you know, and raising funds to create a pool of funds back in 1987 was the first time we gave out our first grant. So the good news is the spirit of mutual aid is alive and well today, and we're seeing it all over the place, neighbor to neighbor, whether that's a physical neighbor or a virtual neighbor. And also we're seeing, which I think of in some ways as mutual aid, a number of funds being created around the country and in the territories. I think today, and Carrie can correct me later on, I think we counted 124 relief funds for artists. And these are everything from very localized $250 quick grants to, hopefully everybody saw yesterday, Artist Relief just announced a grant of $5,000 for artists having emergencies. So you're going to get a lot of information today on this call today. So make sure you're taking notes. There are federal relief funds that everybody's talking about, but also don't forget the community financial institutions in your own hometowns. Those CDFIs are often artist friendly. There's so many local, regional, and national funds. I know CERFplus is keeping a list of those on our website. And I will post up another little bit of inspiration article in the chat group, but I don't want to take up any more of your time. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Great, Cornelia, thank you so much for everything that you and CERF do to support the community. We really appreciate it. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce the Executive Director of Springboard for the Arts, Laura Zabel. Laura, would you like to say a welcome to our participants as well?
Sure. Welcome, everyone. It's wonderful to share this virtual space with all of you. And you're going to get to hear from my awesome colleague, Carl, a little more on this call about Springboard's resources and work we're doing. I guess maybe I'll just start with a little bright spot for me in all that's happened in the last month or so, is really this sort of groundswell movement of folks who are starting and building emergency relief programs all over the country. Springboard and other folks have been doing a little bit of work to try and connect that network, both so that we can share resources now, but also because I think there's just a tremendous hope and optimism that perhaps that could be the beginning of a better system of support for artists. I'm really encouraged by the number of people, both local organizations and local arts agencies and city governments and donors who, some of them for the first time, are really seeing how fragile the ecosystem for individual artists is and seeing the need to build better systems of support. So I'm really focused on the urgency of this moment and also trying to make space to think a little bit about what might be possible to build with all of this kind of new or renewed interest in how we support artists and our meaning makers and culture bearers in this country. So thanks everyone for being here, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
That's great. Thanks, Laura, for joining us and supporting us. We really appreciate it. So just real quickly before we move into each of our three presenters, I want to remind people of a few things. We ask that you keep both your microphone and your video off. It should be automatically, both should be off right now, but if for some reason they do come back on, please make sure you turn them back off. For those who want to hide the non-video participants so you don't see a bunch of black squares, you can do that by going to the upper right corner of one of those black squares that have somebody's name in it. You go to the three dots that appear when you take your cursor to the upper right-hand corner, come down and hit hide non-video participants, and it should hide all of them. So on your screen should only be the active participants at any one point in time. And then lastly, can you just put in the chat, can you all hear me okay? Because I've had a few people make a comment that they cannot hear me okay, and I just want to make sure. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, and then last but not least, I'm going to mention this a couple more times. You all will receive a survey after today's call, and I do highly encourage you to please fill that out so that we can know what your needs are. Gives us ideas for future calls, as well as it gives us a lot of great feedback on how we did on today's call. So thank you so much. All right, so our first presenter will be talking about and addressing the question about what are we finding and why is this important work. Ruby Lopez, who is the Senior Director of Local Arts Advancements for Americans for the Arts. Welcome, Ruby. Awesome background that you've got going on there. Ruby is our queen of backgrounds.
You're very kind.
Yes.
Thank you so much. First, I just want to say thank you for having me. It's really, I think, one of the things that I find most inspiring when I get the chance to interact with folks that are in the field, doing great work around community, and having the chance to express themselves, and it's just so much of the great work. So I'm super excited. I probably don't have information that anyone's going to want to hear, but I think it is important to get a great snapshot of what it is we're in the middle of or at the beginning of, but unfortunately not anywhere close to the end of. I want to start with sharing some information about our resource center that we've been compiling. We launched the resource center on March 12th and have had almost 50,000 page views. It's a really high traffic area of our website. We currently are maintaining not just information about Americans for the Arts events, but there's also action alerts. So if there is a call for Congress or advocacy initiatives that are happening, that's a great place to get information, as is the Arts Action Fund, and I'll drop some of these links in the chat box when I'm done. So don't feel like you've got to, frantic to write things down on this one. But in addition to all of that, we're also housing information about relief funds. So I just did a quick count. We've got about 40, just over 40 relief funds listed on our resource page. And then we also have resource pages that you can link to that are either national, local, regional, that you can also get more localized information about what's happening in your community. We also try to include articles that are helpful to tell the story, because sometimes people don't understand the scope of what's happening, but they can get context from an article. So we try to include some of those as well to make it quick and easy for you all to assist in your storytelling efforts. We also have webinars that are educational in nature. All of our COVID-related webinars are currently free to the field. We also have included webinars that are available around the federal relief package and accessing different benefits and different programs. In addition to that, we have some moving to virtual. So for those of you that are exploring the digital environment, there's some resources there that might be helpful as well, along with access to other resource pages that folks are compiling. We really try not to duplicate efforts, but amplify the great work that's happening. So you'll see us link out to a lot of other folks' resource pages just because they're already doing a great job, so there's no reason to duplicate that, but we want to make sure that people are aware. So you'll find that kind of information on our resource center as well. Speaking of the federal stimulus package, as you know, there's been several initiatives. The one I think that is most important for individuals is the unemployment parameters that have opened to allow folks that are self-employed. I am not, by any imagination, the expert in any of navigating that, but I am very lucky to work with several folks that are. And one of our in-house complete beast of an expert is Nina Oslu-Tuncelli, and she has graciously made arrangements for the ability for individuals in the field to call in. She's hosting virtual office hours for the next 2 weeks, Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Time. I'll post the link to that as well. You pop in, ask your questions. You don't have to stay the whole hour unless that's your jam and you want to hear what other people are talking about. But it's really a chance to ask your specific situation questions. It's not a big just overview. If you want to ask, I think like someone had mentioned earlier, you know, I've applied and I'm not quite sure when I'm going to hear. She'll be able to give you some of that insight. I have this, and I'm not sure how to put it all together. She'll be able to guide you through that. Along with that, I'll also post a really great resource table that she assembled that organizes what the relief packages are, who's eligible within each of those, and where to get more information. So I'll make sure to pop those in the chat box when I'm done as well. The big news, as Cornelia mentioned, that I wanted to touch on today is also that the Artist Relief Fund was launched. That was done to support artists during the current crisis. It was assembled by a coalition of national arts grant makers, and it is intended to give $5,000 grants to artists from all around the country. And as part of that, we Americans for the Arts have been designated a research partner. And so yesterday, where are we? No, Wednesday, we launched a COVID-19 impact survey for artists and creative workers in the attempt to capture the deeper impact financially, what is happening with your creative practice. There's 4 different sections that you would be responding to, and we're going to be using that to assist in the storytelling and also to be able to convey the magnitude of what's happening to individuals. We launched pretty quickly an organizational survey that also has some real-time findings on that resource center. You can click on the dashboard. It'll give you your it'll give you the aggregated total. You can filter down by a number of different parameters. And so we're hoping that as this artist survey progresses, we're going to be able to provide that kind of access to the findings as well. But the big picture, we have had in the first kind of day or so, just under 2,500 artists and individuals have responded to the survey. Of those respondents, 53% have had to cancel contracts, furlough, or I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong ones. Okay, of that, just about half say that they work full-time with their creative practice. 97% have experienced income loss, 72% have experienced unanticipated expenditures, and 65% have reported becoming fully unemployed because of the COVID-19 crisis. We were able to do some really preliminary digging into the craft artist category. And so of that 2,500 or so, we have about, I think the number's higher, but of the craft artists that responded, we're currently at almost 1,400. And let's see, let me just scroll down. 98% have experienced income loss. Average total financial impact per person is estimated at roughly $47,000. 72% plan to apply for relief in the form of grants, 45% are going to apply for unemployment, and 35% don't yet have a plan, but are looking at making one. One of the really stark findings is that 56% have no savings now as a result of what's happening.
Wow.
And 68% can't access their supplies, resources, spaces, or people that are necessary for their creative practice. And, this will come as no surprise, but 87% say it's hard to plan with so many unknowns right now. So there's just a lot going on. I was trying to, kind of share some of the better outcomes in the beginning because, the reality is that we are in the most challenging experience that we've gone through ever as a society and a generation. And so it's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot.
Yeah, great, Ruby. Thanks for sharing everything that all the things that the Americans for the Arts is doing, and all the ways you're trying to support people. For those of you, some of you asked for a link for the survey. It has been posted in the chats, and we also will have it available after as well. So just know that Lauren has posted it a few times. Thank you, Lauren. And again, we will be saving this chat, and you'll be able to access those links after they're posted early next week. Ruby, tell me a little bit about how you feel that you can encourage both organizations, nonprofit organizations, and individuals to advocate for what's next.
Yeah, that's it's been hard to kind of think through what's next. But I had a great conversation with a group of organizations in the music industry, and they are asking the same question as organizations: what can we think about, and how can we help the artists that we work with? I think the big thing right now that can happen immediately is, as an organization, educating yourself and connecting yourself to what your local resources are. Artists especially are looking for anything that's going to help them get through this time. And because you are an organization that they're connected to, they're going to trust you. They're going to look to you for any information that you may have. So if you have the capacity to do that, just doing a little bit of research and being able to answer the questions when they come. And if you can't, at least understanding where can you send people for more information. We get a lot of emails from folks all around the country, and the first thing that we do is direct them to their local community, and we try to identify for them, at the very least, their local arts agency or their state arts agency connection, to just kind of get them into what is most probably most immediately available for them. I think for individuals right now, thinking about not just what does this mean next for your practice? Educating yourself on some digital tools that may be available to continue your practice. But also right now, I have been so inspired, but equally dismayed by the amount and the volume of free content that is moving through the internet right now. And while my heart soars that artists are so altruistic and giving and generous of spirit, I just get so disheartened because all of that work is worth something. And we should be unapologetic about paying for the content that we're consuming. We don't think twice about paying for Netflix. We don't think twice about paying for Spotify. We don't think twice about streaming. Then why do we hesitate, or why do we expect to get content from artists for free? So I've been saying to a lot of organizations that work with individual artists to encourage them, if they don't want to put a specific fee, to at least ask for pay what you can. Don't call it a donation. It is a fee. Your time, your energy, your knowledge, your skill, your creativity is worth something. And while yes, it's great to support what's happening right now, I think it is also important to be realistic about what the other side is going to be. And we don't want society at large taking all of this for granted and forgetting that this was a response to an unprecedented time and not what should be the normal.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And we talked about that a little bit earlier this week when we spoke. And I think it's something that I've definitely, it's stuck with me, taken away, is it's great to access all these free creatives offering their services in some way, but everybody who is an artist and a practicing artist, they have a value, and we can't forget that and take advantage of that. Absolutely, which is a really good point. What were you going to say?
Oh, the other thing,
Yes.
Organizations, if you are streaming content that you secured from an artist, you should consider what that means in terms of residuals or royalties or additional income directed towards those artists, because you know what? They worked hard to create that content with you. And I think kind of coming out of the new normal, we really should be thinking about what that means in the long term as far as intellectual property and what royalties and residuals look like and feel like in the digital environment.
That's another really good point. Hey, Ruby, how long is the survey going to be open? Somebody wanted to know.
The survey is going to be open at the moment, just ongoing.
Okay.
So I would anticipate it'll probably be at least several weeks. The organizational survey that we launched is already going into a second iteration that we're hoping to launch in the next couple of weeks. And the organization survey for sure is just going to be ongoing until this is over, because we're really hoping to capture not just the moment now, but the moment as it continues to unfold. unfold and the moment once we kind of get to the other side of this.
Great. Another question from the audience is, are there any resources for artists currently on visas that cannot apply for unemployment?
Ooh, that is going to be a Nina question. I remember reading something about artists that are on visas, but I can't remember if it was related to the unemployment or related to the payroll protection. So I would hate to misdirect or misguide. I would definitely suggest on Monday, hop into that office hours with Nina, and I am 99.9% sure we'll be able to answer that in detail.
That's great. And Ruby did post the link for that in the chat, so you can find that there. And there's a comment that I wanted to share with you, Ruby. Someone said, it seems that now would be a really good time for arts organizations to get together to really demand the importance for universal health care. Who's going to be able to pay for healthcare premiums and high deductibles? And worse still, the folks that get this virus have to pay for treatment. Not having to worry and pay high premiums and deductibles will help many of us. I think I am not alone in thinking. And then afterwards, many people echoed in the chat, amen, yes, agreed, excellent point, preach. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that idea.
Yeah, I think this is an excellent moment to be advocating for those things. I know in the work that I've been doing with our U.S. Urban Arts Federation, which is the leaders of the designated local arts agencies in the largest 60 cities, they have also been thinking about how do they mobilize as a body around not just initiatives specifically directed at artists, but to rally around locally those initiatives that impact humans, of which artists are there. And so a lot of them have already been looking at this kind of centralizing alignment, specifically around housing. And so I wrote the note down. I don't have an answer because I think, again, this is all unfolding, and universal healthcare benefits in general, I think have been such a topic of conversation, but right now such an important element given how many folks are going to be unemployed, either relied on that part-time gig or relied on the full-time gig to provide that infrastructure for them to be able to have their creative life. And with all of that gone, everything changes. So I want to say thank you for bringing that up. I've made the notation. We're constantly at the office right now talking about where we should be focusing, what else is on the radar that we're missing. And I think this is something that definitely should get put on that list for conversation and floating it out to everybody else that we talk to. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
That's great. Also, going back to your point about making sure that artists, if they are offering their services, offering a pay what you can, there's a couple questions around what kind of programs or mechanisms that people can use to actually request support or, pay what you can type of opportunities. Do you know of some of the mechanisms artists are using today for that?
I mean, honestly, social media has been a fascinating mechanism. I'll say today myself, there is a dance instructor that I am friends with in Chicago, and she had posted on Facebook that she would custom design a 15-minute dance lesson related to any subject. Like she said, school subject. Kids are on spring break today and yesterday, and I hit her up and I said, hey, I would love to have you do that for me, but I don't need a school subject. How about just robots? And she's like, great. So I paid her $10 for each of my kids. And then on Zoom, she sent us a link. We fired it up on the computer. She taught them this amazing lesson around an actuator and robot functions, and she had them dancing, and I felt it was an absolute premium that I was paying $10. I would have paid $50 for the way that it ended up working out. So specific platforms, I just saw Tracy Bonham, who is one of my all-time favorite independent female singers from the 80s, 90s, and she and 3 other musicians were on Shut In and Sing, which is a concert platform. So I wouldn't say that I'm familiar with any one specific way that folks are doing it. The thing is, just do it. I don't think it's anything about finding the right place. If you're going to post a YouTube tutorial and you're telling people about it, tell them also that, hey, normally I would charge $50 for a half-hour lesson. Pay what you can.
Mm-hmm. And I know
because
a lot of artists been using Venmo for that process
Venmo,
too.
yep,
Yeah,
I've done Venmo. I paid her via PayPal today.
yeah,
Venmo, I've done a couple of things through that. So,
that's
you
great.
know,
And regarding the digital content of performances versus kind of like what Wage had established, do you have know if anybody's actually having that conversation of what would be a base fee structure for digital content versus actual like workshops, exhibitions, and performances, which is what Wage had already established?
yeah, I haven't seen any specific standard. I haven't seen, I'm not saying that it hasn't happened. I haven't seen any conversation around standardized digital fees because I think people are just freaking out right now.
Mhm.
But I think it's a great thing to start thinking about. You know, even in the event transformation, as people are going from live events to digital events, there's been a lot. I mean, even just our own internal reflections. You know, we charge this much because of space, because of catering, because of this, that, and the other. And this experience when it's live, how do you value that in a digital environment? Because it isn't just taking that live event and putting it on a digital platform. It's completely rethinking the way that you're doing something. It's the same for individual artists that are trying to teach lessons. It isn't just doing it from your living room. It's rethinking the way that you're presenting it. It's rethinking the way that you format it. It's paying for technology.
Mhm.
I think, you know, looking at your real costs and valuing your time should be consistent. You shouldn't say, oh, well, I'm doing it, you know, from my desk and, you know, 50 people, I'm not spending that much time. You're spending the same amount of time to prepare for that digital experience as you are for the live experience. So take that into account and don't undersell yourself.
And why do you think so many creatives are actually suddenly offering their services for free? Do you think it's them trying to maintain
Oh,
visibility, or is it about community or uplifting and
yep.
bringing beauty in a really ugly world right now?
Yes, yes,
Yes,
yes.
yes. Okay,
Yes, all of
that's
that.
great.
You know, I've seen it in all iterations. I've seen folks that are like, okay, I just paid, I think I paid $10 for a 5-minute sketch from an artist. And the way that they phrased their post on Facebook was like, I'm just doing this. Maybe I read into it. I felt like they're looking for something quick. There's some gap that they're trying to bridge right now because this seems like really fast and loose, but I'm all in. Here's my $15, do my 3 kids, and let's move on. But I think it's all those. I think you know, as artists, this is what we do. This is why we're here. It's beauty in an ugly world. It's, you know, relief. It's hope. It's all of the beautiful things. And at the same time, there's a reality under that, you know, there's bills to pay. I'm blessed. I got a full-time job, but if I was, you know, teaching dance like I was 15 years ago, it would be a whole different story. And I think we're lucky that we have technology that's allowing this to be a different experience than it was during the recession in 2008 and 9, where we didn't have these kinds of options for artists to try to continue their, you know, any kind of income. So yeah, I think it's for all of that.
Yeah, great. Thank you. There's a question in the group that, you know, most artists who make and sell work or have performances, they get 1099s. They often fill out a Schedule C. But there are a group of artists that don't do that and have what this person's calling speculative income. And of course, in that situation, those artists are not qualifying for any of the reliefs that are available. Do you have any thoughts around that, or how she can help her artists find some relief or some support?
Yeah, so some of that, what we've been telling folks is to, you know, still try and pursue what you can and find documentation as if you were being audited by the IRS, right? So even if you're not filing all of those things, there's still documentation. Do you have a flyer that has your name, that has the date? When folks are canceling events, ask them to give that to you in writing. Ask them to include the value of what that would have been. Ask them to help that documentation. As an organization, if you're canceling on artists, include that information and make it easy for them to be able to provide that documentation. In some cases, there isn't anything else that can be done. I think it's going to be looking at local grants to bridge the gap at the moment. I think it's going to be really rethinking the way that you're doing business between now and the end of the year. It's going to be thinking about what your 2021 is already going to look like or not look like. But yeah, as far as like, we've talked to a couple folks that I think we're looking at the payroll protection program, but didn't have some of the more formalized documentation. And it's definitely get what you can.
Yeah.
Go for it. And if you get told no, but it's better than not trying at all.
Absolutely. There's a couple questions about different kinds of union opportunities. Are there unions for visual artists or any kind of unions that you know of? Because I think that's been asked a few times here by a lot of the artists on.
Yeah, so we have worked predominantly in the nonprofit area. So we're just starting to kind of get up to speed on the areas where there's unions. We know that there's quite a few around, the film industry and production folks with theater. There is a group called Freelancers Union that might be of interest to folks, but I'm just not as familiar with unions as I think we need to be now. So we're also getting caught in that in between where we realize that there's areas we need to get quickly get up to speed on so that we can be helpful. But they just haven't been areas where we've been deeply engaged. So if that's helpful to folks. I see Deborah just posted Freelancers Union.
She did, they've done. Cornelia put the Freelancers Union in there. So
that's a great, that's the one that I found. They also have a Facebook group that's really helpful. They're doing a lot of advocacy that I think is aligned. So that's one that I would suggest looking into.
That's great. Wonderful. Well, Ruby, we're going to move on, but thank you so much for sharing your information and your knowledge today. And we'll bring you back at the end for some group questions. So again, thank you so much for everything.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, and I know we didn't get to everybody's questions. We try our best to get to as many as we can, but we are in a limited time. But again, a lot of the questions that you're asking, I think would be really great for logging into those questions by Nina or questions for Nina on Mondays. So I think that might be a great option for many of you to get your specific questions answered. Okay, so our next guest is going to come in and we're going to chat a little bit about how the craft field specifically has been impacted and what sources of relief are out there for artists, businesses, and organizations. So everybody please welcome Carrie Cleveland, the Education and Outreach Manager for CERFplus. Hi, Carrie. How are you doing today?
Hi, Gwynne. Hi, it's nice to see your face. And I want to say thank you.
Yours too. Yeah. You're welcome. It's kind of funny how we're all isolated, but connecting more, right?
Exactly.
I feel that's really fascinating.
I've seen you more in the past couple of weeks than the past couple of years.
Exactly.
I want to just thank you, Gwynne and SNAG and the Council and Springboard for making this series possible. Personally, I was going to be with some of you all in St. Paul next week. And since that can't happen, I'm really grateful to be able to be here and share info and also just say, hi, how are you? I miss you. Let's check in with each other. And so I want to talk about so what CERFplus has been learning and relief that's available on this, and both through organizations and federally. So CERFplus conducted its own survey of studio-based artists. We had over 3,200 responses. It ran from March 20th to April 3rd. So when it launched, a lot of this was still really new. There were still a lot of states that hadn't enacted stay-at-home orders yet. There was just a lot of unknowns, and we can see that in our survey data. So I pulled out the section from people who identify as artists who work in craft disciplines. There were 1,800 responses. You guys are wonderful. Thank you so much for being willing to share your experience and what you're thinking about, and what you're worried about, and what you're doing. And so I can share back to you what some of that looks like. And you're the first people to hear this particular set of information. So one of our first questions was to ask how people were already or really projecting seeing the impacts of COVID-19 on their career. And so the top 3 effects that people were seeing and anticipating were show cancellations at 79.39%, loss of direct sales, 71%, and then loss of revenue through gallery sales, and that's 58%. And so at that time, like I was saying, this was still, really early as this was unfolding. Loss of access to studio was one of the things we asked about. It wasn't seen as a big factor yet. But just hearing what Ruby is saying, clearly that situation has really changed for a lot of people. And we asked people to calculate their immediate financial loss because of COVID-19. And a lot of respondents weren't ready to project that. A lot of people shared a range because they're still kind of looking at what was happening and figuring out where they were going to be. But for those participants who were able to estimate a figure, the average losses immediately were $6,440. And then we asked people if they could project out what their losses would be in 3 months. And the average there was $17,774. And so those were some of the kind of more quantitative pieces we asked, but we asked a lot of questions just hoping that people would feel comfortable sharing what their immediate needs are and their future concerns, and anything that they're doing differently. And I can share, because that's not anything I can give you numbers around. I just want to share back some themes that I saw and what some people were saying. The immediate need, like the resounding answer, is money, cash. Money to pay bills, thinking about mortgages. And, again, this was all before the CARES Act had been passed. The other really common thread was support in getting set up for and/or increasing online sales. People, were also talking about the reality that they just need time, because not only has their career changed, their home situation has changed. They've gone from being able to be in their studio to helping to homeschool their children. Like, even if they had strong online channels, like some of their time to make work just doesn't exist anymore. And when we asked about future needs, those concerns were reiterated a lot. Again, with the unknowns, are more shows going to be canceled? How long is this going to last? There was worry that there wouldn't be federal relief, or that federal relief wouldn't be extended to individual artists. And that some people, there was a respondent in Cape Cod who mentioned, the worry about tourism, if, how long this lasts, not just, show cancellations, but their specific location, would that be impacted? How long, et cetera? What's the summer going to be like? And when people talked about what they're doing differently, again, this really reflected how much has shifted. There were a lot of responses still talking about, maintaining distance from employees within your studio. And then the way that people are thinking about changing how they make their income. Again, really the big theme was pivoting to online sales or developing online classes to supplant these in-person classes that can't happen now. Some people were talking about applying for work at some of the essential industries that are still functioning right now. There was another theme of people talking about knowing that they need to change how they sell their work, but really just with the overwhelm and everything happening so fast, not having the brain space to really devote to thinking about that yet, and trying to figure out how they can just kind of get enough of a grasp on what's happening to really make those plans. And then there's a concern too that, even if people do shift their work online, are buyers out there, with the economy being so fragile for a lot of people, are there going to be customers to buy the work? People also talked about not being able to keep staff on, and both the stress of the fact of that and having to make those really tough calls, but also then the reality that as they're trying to keep their business going, they're taking on much more than they were doing previously and trying to balance that out. So those were the big takeaways and pieces of information that we came away with from our survey. And so I want to shift from that to relief, sources of relief.
Yes.
Because
obviously artists need the relief, right? I mean,
exactly.
These takeaways obviously state that. Yeah,
and I mean, of course, that's what's happening with, with all of us needing to be home and take care of ourselves. But so let's talk about what we can do now. So for those of you who know CERFplus, you know that our founding mission is an emergency relief fund for artists who work in craft disciplines. Our COVID-19 fund is at the ready for artists experiencing hardship from the medical impacts of COVID-19 with $3,000 grants. But like Laura said in her welcome, what has been so inspiring and motivating in the past month is seeing just how many new emergency relief funds have been created in response to this to meet this need, from regional arts councils like here in Vermont, the Vermont Arts Council has a fund, to crowdsourced efforts like in Seattle. There's the Artist Relief Fund that Ijeoma Olua created and is raising funds for through GoFundMe. So this has been mentioned several times. There are a lot of organizations aggregating lists of these funds. CERFplus has one. The link to our COVID-19 response page is being shared around. Really, if you just get to our homepage, like there's a banner right at our homepage that goes to our response. So even if you just like Google CERFplus, you're going to get to us and our list of resources. There's one really terrific compilation from Artists Thrive. Cornelia was mentioning it in her intro. I think it's actually up, Cornelia, from the number you cited. I think it's up to like 130 emergency relief funds compiled. And then we have a number listed on our site as well. And I want to reiterate, it's been mentioned several times for people who may have joined in since, or just before I started talking, really make sure everyone's hearing like that Artist Relief Fund is up. It's artistrelief.org. We link to it through our page, so you don't need to remember that. Launched yesterday. It's a national emergency relief fund for all artists. It specifically includes craft. They stated, they're crystal clear about that. And those grants are $5,000, and they're specifically for COVID-19 financial hardship. And then for organizations, I also want to make sure that people are aware. There's been talk about the CARES Act and individual artists. I just want to make sure it's on people's radar that the National Endowment for the Arts received $75 million in the CARES Act. 60% of that is going to be going back out in direct grants. They just opened up their first cycle, I believe today, and that's specifically for organizations that have received funding from the NEA within the past 4 years. And then there's a second cycle for other organizations, and that's going to open up in July. So that is coming. So if you're an organization, keep that on your radar. Yeah. And so then lastly, I want to just run through some kind of high notes on the CARES Act and the federal relief that's available, because the reality is that, a lot of the grants that are available, they might be for $500, they might be for $1,000, but that's a terrific help, but it's not. We need more. We need the federal government to make people financially solvent. And so there are a couple components that were available in the CARES Act, made available to individual artists. Some of these are also applicable to businesses and organizations. But the first piece that's really important and just such a good piece of news is that pandemic unemployment assistance is available to individual artists and self-employed workers. That's huge. I think a lot of you know that's usually not the case, and something that's not accessible. And also it's including an extra 13 weeks. So it's 39 instead of 26 weeks. And that pandemic unemployment assistance, as opposed to just regular unemployment, it means that there's an additional $600 a week added to the payments. So some of the details that are really high note here that are really important too, and I encourage you to take Ruby up on her offer to connect with Nina if you have really specific questions. But so even though it was the federal government that made this available, it's being administered through the states, which means that as each state figures out how to do this, there's a little bit of a patchwork because they're all doing it slightly differently. As of a day or so ago, I know that 17 states were ready to go in accepting applications from self-employed individuals. And that's changing rapidly. There are a lot that are still figuring it out. So if this is a direction you're going, check with your unemployment office. Probably going to have to go through online. They are swamped right now. No one's able to, getting through on the phone is really challenging. And I know how frustrating it is. I'm really encouraging you to be persistent with it. I can report back that people are getting it. It is happening. It's real. So just, yeah, be persistent and you take advantage of the resources where people can help you out with questions on that.
Absolutely.
And just a really important note to make sure people are aware of on unemployment. You recertify every week. It can be like an automatic, like online check-in or like a call that you kind of input information, just, to make sure you're aware that you keep recertifying it every week. It's simple, but just make sure you keep doing that. And then there are 2 loan programs that were made available. One is the economic injury disaster loans. Those are for small businesses. Again, they've been made available to self-employed individuals, sole proprietors, freelancers. This is the one that you apply through the Small Business Administration. It's the one where you can get a $10,000 advance on that loan that's going to be considered a grant, which is great news. The challenge with all of the CARES Act is that it's such a moving target. There are pieces that are changing constantly. This was originally projected out to be an up to $2 million loan. We're hearing it's getting truncated to 15,000, just so people are aware of that. And that another piece of information I just heard today is that if you're using part of it for payroll, that portion is being limited to $1,000 per employee. And we are hearing that a lot of these are first come, first serve. So if this is a component that you're interested, I would encourage you, and haven't looked into yet, I would encourage you to do that. And then the last component is the payroll protection program. So this loan is explicitly for helping small businesses maintain payroll. So this loan can be forgivable if you're spending 75% of it on paying employees. This one, instead of going through the Small Business Administration, you do go through a bank. It is ultimately approved by Small Business Administration, but you work through your bank. So if you have a relationship with your bank, that's a great place to start. And some of the larger banks even have dedicated SBA certified lenders on staff who might be able to expedite loan applications. So yeah, start with your bank. The applications opened up on April 3rd for most small businesses and opened up for independent contractors today. And so again, hearing that's first come, first serve, the funds are going. So if this is something you've been thinking about and really going into, I would hop on that. And so the other piece I just want to make sure to share with people is that as you're going through this, we have a form set up on our website where you can give us feedback on what the experience was, because this is an ongoing conversation at the federal level. Other relief packages are being considered and it's changing and it's moving pieces. And if people making the decisions around this aren't hearing about what isn't working, they're going to think it's all working fine. And so we have a spot where you can share back, how would it go applying for unemployment insurance? Like what worked, what didn't? I really encourage you to share that back with us. If you don't want to use the form, email me. You know that our website's CERFplus.org, so my email address is just Carrie at CARRIE. Very particular about the spelling of my name. But also if you spell it wrong, I'm still going to get it anyway.
Nice,
but,
you have a couple options there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think that's great to help outline the CARES Act. I took a really interesting webinar earlier this week because, of course, as SNAG is a small nonprofit business, and we did apply for the PPP loan. But it's a woman who's kind of an expert in the CARES Act and those kind of. She said, there's a lot of holes, there's a lot of incomplete information, and like even people who applied last week for the EIDL loan, that paperwork was wrong through the SBA and they've relaunched new paperwork this week. So the reality of what I'm seeing in the comments is everybody's experiencing the mess and the uncertainty. People are applying for unemployment and getting denied. That's a very common thing, and each state's unemployment requirements and when they get their SBA support will come in as they get it. So understanding that, each of you as individuals who have a lot of questions around personal unemployment and applying for that, like reiterating what Carrie said, while it's very challenging to get anybody from the unemployment office on the phone, patience and tenacity are going to be your two best friends there, because you're really going to need to get somebody from your state unemployment office on the phone to answer all your specific questions. If you did get denied, you should reapply, because a lot of people haven't been set up to help sole proprietors yet, or the gig artists, right? And so those gig artists are going to naturally get denied right away before they've got all their systems in place. So just know that it's going to take a lot of tenacity and patience on your part to take some time to really find the ways to connect to your local state unemployment office. Also, like I said, the information, like you said, Carrie, is changing every day. And so a lot of resources on Americans for the Arts website, on CERFplus website, on Springboard for the Arts website, on American Craft Council's websites, on SNAG's websites. Also lots of local funds that are being created to support artists. And I think that's really important to know. A lot of the money that went to the NEA will get funneled to state arts council. So make sure that you're signed up for your state arts council's email list so that you get informed when they have their funds and are ready to do their relief funding as well. So I just think it's really important to try to stay as connected as possible, so that you can actually, really get as much information as possible. We totally understand that it's frustrating, right, Carrie? Like, not having all this information. But I think so many people are working so hard, particularly Americans for the Arts, the American Craft Council, Springboard, and CERF, to keep up on that information as it comes in. So just keep in tune, sign up for go to everybody's website after this. If you're not on everybody's mailing list, sign up for their mailing list, because they'll keep you posted in the mailing list. I have to say, some of the preliminary emails that Cornelia sent out to help the nonprofits was really helpful for me around the PPP loan, and making sure you contact your banker and let them know before they even opened those applications that you're interested. It made my process go much smoother. And, I did get notified that we got approved through our bank, but now we're waiting from the SBA. So people know it's getting processed. This paperwork is getting processed. It's slowly getting through there. For those of you who want to know what gig workers are, it's kind of like people who usually in the performance industry who have different gigs where they perform at different, and it's not different from artists doing different art shows. It's just a term that's used commonly to talk about sole proprietors or people that are 1099 and kind of, contract workers. So somebody asked me what a gig worker is. And so I wanted to, kind of just clarify that. But it's just a very confusing time. And like I said, staying connected, being an advocate for yourself right now is going to be extremely important. And having to balance that with working remotely or losing income or child caring and teaching remotely. I mean, we understand all of that is really, really challenging. And so also finding time to try to also care for yourself, which is something that we have to remember too. But Carrie, thank you so much for the information. If you haven't filled out, your survey is still open.
The survey, that one's actually closed.
Okay.
But by all means, I still want to hear what's going on with you. So feel free to just, you don't have to go through SurveyMonkey now. Just come right to me.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So great. So thank you so much, Carrie. I really appreciate all of your information, and thank you, CERFplus, for everything that you do for the craft community. It's just so truly valuable, and we really, really appreciate everything that you're doing. Okay, so moving on to our last presenter, we're going to be talking a little bit about kind of how can we take care of one another, both also ourselves and our community. So joining us for the last presentation is Carl Atia Swanson, who is the Associate Director of Springboard for the Arts. Carl, there you are. Hey, Carl,
hello,
how's
everybody.
it going?
I'm doing really well, thanks.
Good. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
I feel like I need to start this off because we've been here for about an hour now. If everyone just wants to stretch their arms up.
I love that idea.
Yeah, and move your body around a little bit, because we're going to talk about how are we taking care of ourselves, and how are we taking care of our organizations, and how are we taking care of our community. That's the giant existential question of this moment, isn't it?
Yes.
So, and it's one that I think about in a lot of concentric circles of how these things overlap with each other, and how we're feeding each other and feeding these different processes. It was really brought home a couple days ago in a conversation with Amelia Brown, who is Springboard's board chair. She's the founder of Emergency Arts and an expert in artist responses to emergencies. And she was talking about how we're all experiencing one big trauma together, but then all of us all have our own individual experiences of that trauma, and trying to negotiate how those things are happening at the same time, happening in conflict, and how we sort through this situation is really the big challenge for ourselves. So starting just, really centrally thinking about our work and our practice, doing the things that we can to take care of ourselves. So making sure that we're moving our bodies and drinking water and meditating and doing the things exactly, making sure that we really can do the physical care, the mental care that we can to get us through a difficult situation. One of the things that we at Springboard have started to do on our coronavirus resources page is put a list of basic needs, health needs, and mental health resources, because we know that this is an incredibly difficult time for everybody, and mental health care, we're making it through the crisis right now and the adrenaline is there, but honestly, that adrenaline is also wearing off. And so the issues that we're going to face coming down the line, we're going to have to think about how we're taking care of our mental health and our physical health in this moment, in this situation. And also just, I was snapping right along when Ruby was talking about making sure that we're valuing everybody's work and that people are being clear about their value and getting things online, because if you are a creative worker and if your art form is your income, then there's this enormous pressure to get things online. But also in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of a crisis, in the middle of trauma, is a terrible time to think about new things. I know this is reflected in the AFTA survey results, but Mid-America Arts Alliance did a survey where they asked a question around how has this moment impacted your productivity? And 60% of those people responding, and they had about 1,800 responses, said that their productivity is down right now. And that's not surprising because we're in the middle of a crisis. All of our work situations are shifting. So how do we be gentle with ourselves as well as doing the work that we need to do to move forward? We've talked about it before. One of the key things that people need right now to alleviate some of the stress is just straight cash. People need money. And so when Springboard saw sort of the wave of cancellations starting to come and how that was going to impact our community of artists, we already had an existing emergency relief fund. And so we put $10,000 from our budget, moved that around to the fund. And $10,000 now seems like a tiny amount, and it is a tiny amount. Where that was all gone within the first day that we opened the applications, but that was the 12th of March in which we opened that up, and we're able to take our own, some of our own budgeted money and expand the system that we already had to really respond to what we saw as this growing need. Over the course of this last 4 weeks, we've received over 1,000 applications, been able to fund 585 artists directly in Minnesota of up to $500 emergency grants. So that's over $280,000 going back out to artists in Minnesota to help bridge this gap. I mean, and those responses that we were getting, especially for the first couple of weeks, were, I don't know how I'm going to pay my April rent now that all of my shows have been canceled, now that all of my teaching gigs have been canceled, now that all of my markets have been canceled. And so we took our emergency relief fund, we're able to build it out a system, use our organizational capacity, our staff capacity to turn around and care for our community specifically in that way. And then Springboard's DNA is that we have a bias for action, and then we want to share everything that we do. So one of the programs that I manage is Creative Exchange. It's our national platform where we share toolkits from our own programs and artist-led creative projects around the country. So we started writing down how we were thinking about our emergency relief fund and sharing that out with people. And as Laura mentioned at the top in the introduction, have been able to share that really broadly and help seed people to do the work. I think a big part of my job with Creative Exchange, and especially now, is to let people know that they are not alone. And especially in this moment, we are not alone. We are doing this together. And sharing information is a way that we can care for a broader community to help people get started. And we've seen so many emergency relief funds popping up that have used the toolkit, and we're organizing those people together so that we're also sharing information together and getting people connected. So that's a way that we can take our organizational structures and care sort of is specifically for the artists in Minnesota who we work with, and then more broadly for the communities around the country who we want to support. And then the work that we do, as an organization has shifted radically. We've had to move from an organization that likes to drop in on each other and have meetings and be in each other's company to an organization that has shifted entirely remotely. And there's a certain element of serendipity in that we had just moved an office in our office in St. Paul and gone entirely onto Zoom phones. And so we were like 3 weeks ahead of this Zoom explosion that we're all living in right now. But that's been enabled us to do more chat-based work and to think about how we connect and communicate with each other in a way that makes space and allows for grace in our new situations where we're taking care of families, where we're worried about our loved ones, where we're having to reschedule a lot of our own gigs and do our own projects. Everyone who works at Springboard is also a working artist. And so we've had, our colleagues have had shows canceled. They've run theaters those have just gone dark. So caring for our own folks really specifically. I see people sharing some articles, and one of the ones that in the chat, and one of the things that I've latched onto is one from the Harvard Business Review around grief that was floating out there. And I didn't share it, but I'm sure somebody can find it and post it up there, because that really speaks to how we're working through stages of negotiation of where we're at, and those concentric circles of how we're doing things for ourselves and for our families and for our immediate units, for the organizations we work with, and then broadly for our community. I also think a lot about an interview that I read with Johan Hari, sort of when this was all starting to go off. And the point that he made was that there is a sort of cruel optimism in asking people who are experiencing real financial anxiety, real hardship and distress, to think about care just in terms of turning off the news or just meditating, when what we need to do is organize for broader solutions and to really help people see themselves as part of a broader solution. And that's where I think that this work around the pandemic unemployment insurance, the conversations that we're having about how people access healthcare and health resources, the way that we're talking about what really comes next for artists in the creative economy, not just emergency reliefs, because those are short-term bridges, but how do we think about new WPAs? How do we think about hiring artists in a really meaningful way? How do we talk about value in a really broad way? And then how do we build on this moment? Let's not waste a crisis, but let us do things together now and use that as a basis for moving forward and for really building big picture things. In one of those intersections of how personal care also then feeds up to the way I think about broader care in the community. I've been listening to a lot of my favorite music over the last couple of weeks, including the Hold Steady and their song Stay Positive from their 2008 record. And there's a line in there, there's going to come a time when the true scene leaders are going to have to forget where they differ and get big picture, because the kids at the shows will have kids of their own. And that's where I'm at right now. And that's where I think that we need to be, not just organizing for ourselves and for our own creative communities, but seeing ourselves as broader community members. So not waiting to be invited into conversations around healthcare, but how do we as creative people feed into that conversation? How do we see ourselves in there? How do we see ourselves in conversations about value that feed into ongoing unemployment insurance, to ongoing safety nets beyond this moment of crisis? Because this federal government is trying to invent unemployment insurance for self-employed workers and bring a system of supports that were maybe relevant in the mid-50s into the 21st century internet-based work economy. So we are really getting up to speed really quickly. So there's a lot of pain involved in that, but let's pull that forward and let's build together.
Absolutely. That's great. Those are great messages, Carl. And I think, like it is hard as so many people are struggling for basic needs, to meet their own basic needs. How do they also then take time to reach out and create community and support the community? And I do think this is a really kind of a pivotal moment for artists and for arts organizations to really advocate for, a lot of the cracks in our society have been exposed, and kind of, when you look at people who are hourly employees or people who've been furloughed or laid off and they don't no longer have health insurance in a healthcare crisis, right? Yep. So I think there's just so much opportunity here that we can't lose that opportunity in that site. I've said this in the last call, and I say this all the time, and Sarah is probably going to blush when I say it again, but our first conversation I had with Sarah when Schultz from ACC, when this kind of really stuff started to hit the fan, was she said to me, you know, the best innovation comes in a time of crisis. And so this is a time for us to innovate the art community, to advocate for the art community, and to really find ways to seal the cracks that have been really kind of exposed. And that's where I think what I'm seeing that's so beautiful is these organizations, CERF, SNAG, Springboard for the Arts, ACC, you know, many other craft organizations and art organizations, the Americans for the Arts, we are all coming together, talking more regularly, making efforts, you know, concerted efforts more regularly, which I think is pretty amazing. And so we just can't keep that momentum. We got to keep it moving forward, even in a time where we also have to care for ourselves. I am very open that I have a therapist, and I just had my second teletherapy appointment today before this call. And one of the things she recommended to me, which I think is a really interesting idea, which you kind of talked a little bit about this too, is the anxiety and the grief. Like, we're all in grieving mode right now. We're grieving for the loss of our lives, that the way they used to be. We're grieving then also for the loss of the community. And I'm in Asheville, North Carolina. So not only am I grieving for the loss of my community, but our community is our economic income and impact is based on tourism. And our tourism dollars are, I mean, it's just is going to affect those cities that really rely on tourism greatly. And we're looking at so many small businesses and like the local economy. And so we're grieving for all those circles that you talked about, and giving ourselves time for that, and sitting with the anxiety that you're feeling, or any of the feelings of depression, or, you know, sadness, and just sitting for half an hour a day and allowing yourself to feel those feelings and not trying to push them down by being busy. And I thought that was a really good piece of advice for someone like me who tends to throw myself into more stuff at a time like this, in a crisis, so I don't have to feel those feelings, because that can be icky, right? And so it is so important that we do have that self-care and the care of our families, because we need to stay safe and healthy, as many of us as possible, but also then figure out ways to advocate for a better way on the other side of this. So I think what you guys do at Springboard's amazing. I've actually, at previous positions, used some of your toolkits, like your CSA toolkit. So it's pretty amazing what you guys offer. And if people aren't familiar with Springboard for the Arts, you should check out their website. Lauren's been posting some of the other toolkits here, which I think is great. A lot of people on the chat are definitely sharing not only articles, but some of their experiences. I'm looking to see if there's any questions that I've missed. Most people are just kind of giving, and this is another thing that I think is so beautiful about these kind of forums, is people are sharing with each other insight that they've learned. So not only are you learning from the presenters, but you're learning from each other. So I think this is amazing for people. So thank you for those who've been just putting stuff into the chat and sharing kind of all of their information and that sort of thing. So I'd like to bring back the other two speakers, Carrie and Ruby, onto the screen. If anybody has any more questions, feel free to please type them in the chat. We will be saving both the chat and the recording and making that available on the American Craft Council website later, like next week, early next week. So thank you all, all three of you, Ruby, Carrie, and Carl, for your presentations. I wanted to just see if any of you had some last thoughts or any kind of last, you know, kind of words of inspiration for everybody, because I know that, you know, it's a tough time for everybody.
I'll say, I mean, this is a thing that I think about a lot, is that it's never going to go back to pre-COVID times. So there's not going back to that normal. And also that normal wasn't working out well for a lot of us anyway. So let's not go back to that. That's not where we want to be. So let's build forward.
I agree 100%. You know, I think there's some great takeaways that came from this. Carrie or Ruby, do you have any others that you want to share before I kind of go into my little thing?
I was thinking sort of along the same lines as Carl. One of the things that's so positive, just like Gwynne and I were talking about how we've seen each other more in the past couple of weeks, in the past couple of years, take that energy forward.
Yep, absolutely. Ruby?
Gosh, you know, I first want to acknowledge again just how much work this is and how grateful I am to all of you for hanging in there, for making time today to learn more and share and ask questions and be thoughtful and curious and tenacious and determined, and all of the things that are really the hallmark of the resiliency that the arts are in our communities and our society. And that even if no one else says it, just remember that I see you, we hear you, we appreciate you. We would be lost without all of you. So please hang in there. You're not alone, and we will get to the other side of this, whatever that ends up looking like.
Absolutely. That's great. That's wonderful. Yeah, you know, some of the things also, I think, again, if you see a survey come your way, please take time to fill it out, because this really helps organizations figure out how to create better relief and better, you know, support. I think it's also one of the things that I really took away, Carrie, from you, some of the results you saw, is that people don't have a plan and how hard it is to come up with a plan. But maybe just start in small chunks. Come up with a plan for the next 3 days, right? How can you help work on your business? Is it building your website? What is it that you can do? And just take 1 day, 2 day, 3 days at a time. Don't create, you have to create, you know, a plan for the next year, because we don't know what it's going to look in May. Are we still going to be shelter in place? So I think, you know, just finding that little tiny bit of control, because I think as artists, we all tend to, particularly visual artists, we tend to be a little bit of a control freaks, right? And our control has been completely taken away. And so taking those baby steps, a lot of people wanted to know what artists have been doing to supplement their income. From my experience, I've been seeing artists take up, like a lot of artists have gone to work for like Instacart, because of course that's grocery shopping and that sort of thing. So I know artists have found other ways to supplement income in that way. But I've also do a lot of one-on-one coaching with artists who particularly focus their sales online. And I had a woman sell what I call an added value. It was kind of like a make and take kind of opportunity for local arts teachers to use in their arts lessons online. And it was like a very packaged item. And she sold $20,000 worth of them at 25 bucks a head in a matter of 7 days. So thinking innovatively, push yourself outside your comfort zone, try to see what other artists are doing. There's a lot of great groups on Facebook and social media that are coming together to share ideas. So I think that, you know, there are ways that artists can figure out to get through this. If anybody can come up with innovative, creative solutions, it's artists, right? That's what they do every day in making the work. So it is possible to think outside that box and to really think about ways to supplement that income. Apply for everything and anything. If you get denied, at least you know no because you applied and got denied, not no because you didn't apply. So I think that's also something that's really important. And then last but not least, I'd like to bring back Scott Pollock, who is our Senior Director of Programs and Public Engagement for American Craft Council, to see if he has any last words to wrap up with, because he's the one, he's my insider. The two of us, we have kind of hatched these forum plans with Sarah, and I just wanted to see if, Scott, you had any last thoughts to share with everybody.
Again, I always feel like I sweep in and I'm just sort of loving the love here in the chat room. I really am super grateful for you all spending the time with us today and this super lineup of super informative speakers. I'm just taking away so much right now. The Instagram is going crazy. The chat rooms are going crazy. I really do appreciate this time to get connected and share. Just a quick hello, thank you, and I hope we're able to continue on for our third journey next week, Friday. I hope you're all finding time to see this as a time just to sit back a little bit and relax as well. Like end of week Fridays was an important thing that Gwen and I had wanted to be able to find some space where it is just a way to unwind as well as we go and finish out our week here together. But I do promise we're going to try and get a little live band and some more artists involved in this next series on Friday to close it all out. Maybe we'll do our little jam session at the end and close. But we are focusing our shift next week to education and educators. And I just want to welcome you all back to that conversation, because I think it's going to be critical for us to also talk about the future makers, right? These, you know, the group that's coming in. One, how we'll continue to learn as a community, but also welcome the next generation of thinkers and makers and tinkers into the fold, and to demonstrate to them that and to listen that we're here to build this thing together, this new ship. So thank you, everybody.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Scott. And thank you again to Ruby, Carrie, and Carl. Your presentations were wonderful. I appreciate the optimism. I think it's really important that we try to stay as optimistic as possible in this kind of time. And the three of you have been super inspiring for everybody. And one last plug, because I tend to get into this moderator mode and I forget that my other position as executive director of SNAG is a lot of people are asking for like professional development support and access. SNAG actually runs a professional development program called Road to Success. Our webinars are very inexpensive at $30 for members and $50 for non-members, but we are offering our member rate to anybody at this present moment during this time. And so check it out if you haven't gone there. The webinars are not just for jewelry and metal artists, which is what our organization specifically supports, but there are other organizations. Springboard for the Arts has some amazing toolkit resources that I really will make sure that you check out. And AFTA has amazing resources on their website, as well as CERF and ACC. So don't forget to go there, look, and you'll find them all. I think it's pretty amazing that everybody you know, has this ability to support each other in a time like this. And I'm just excited to see how we can continue to come together and really move this whole field forward and seal those cracks that have been kind of really, you know, exposed during this time. So thank you three so much for everything today. We so appreciate it. Everybody who joined us, thank you for taking time out of your day to listen. I hope you all stay safe and healthy. But still, not only physical distancing, but don't social distance yourself. Reach out to your people, stay social. I've had more Zoom social hours at night than I can imagine, but it's been so important. So make sure that you do that self-care and physically distance yourself, but don't socially distance. So again, thank you, everybody. Thank you for American Craft Council, CERFplus, Springboard for the Arts, and SNAG. And for Americans for the Arts, thank you all very much. We just appreciate all the work that you do, and everybody have a good rest of your evening or afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in, and try to take some time for yourself this weekend. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.